Hello, everyone, and as always, thank you so much for being a part of Untapped. We wanted to get this presentation out early because this is a very stressful time of the year. We see a lot of assignments, projects, final exams, really packed into this short time period. On top of that, a lot of extracurriculars are wrapping up, concerts, plays, big athletic events, and then we have family events and holidays. So this is one of the most, if not the most stressful time of the year for a lot of families. So we want to talk about what we can do to finish the year strong. And the piece that very few people remember, and that's the getting rest and rejuvenating after a long semester and prepping for the next semester. So here's what we're going to go through today. We're going to talk about how to manage this overwhelming time of the year and how to sense when our students are overwhelmed or highly anxious. Then we're going to talk about how we end the semester strong. We're going to look at the research behind that, especially for students with executive function challenges. Then we're going to talk about how to recover without regressing. Students with executive function deficits, whether it's over winter break, summer break, we're twice as likely to regress and lose academic process than the typical population. And so we want to talk about how do we balance this recovery without regression, and then getting organized for the next semester, starting it strong. Since this is not live, please email me with any questions and answers or any questions you have, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I want to make sure everyone feels supported this time of year. So if you have any individual questions, don't hesitate to let me know. Before we jump into these strategies, as always, let's talk about what executive function skills are for people who may not have seen the first couple presentations. Executive function skills are the skills that help you reach your goals. So during this stressful final exam period, there's a lot of goals. We're trying to end each class strong. We're trying to end our extracurriculars strong. We're trying to prepare for the holidays. Well, executive function skills are what helps us reach all these goals. And so these skills help us plan out for finals and have a good plan that we actually follow and get from beginning to end on. They help us maintain attention for extended period of time. Remember multiple instructions. Again, we're balancing a lot of instructions, a lot of to-dos this time of year. It's our executive function skills that help us do that, manage our to-do lists, and juggle everything that's going on. At the end of the day, we're trying to end the semester strong, and our executive function skills are what helps us reach our goals. And so when I talk about these skills throughout the presentation, this is what I'm referring to. Before we discuss strategies about how to do well through this final stretch, let's talk about overwhelm. Our students struggle with something called metacognition, which is just an understanding of yourself. And so a lot of times we may not even know when we get overwhelmed into an anxious state. We just haven't developed those skills to detect that yet. And so there are certain things that we can look out for to see if our students are overwhelmed and on the edge of shutting down or just being too anxious to learn. So let's look at some of those indicators. One of the cognitive signs of stress or overwhelm that we see is if there's a difficulty concentrating, and this is beyond normal. Everything we're going to talk about, we all have this, but we're talking about way beyond what we typically see. So difficulty concentrating, racing thoughts, if you see them starting to talk really quickly, that's a sign of high levels of stress or anxiety and overwhelm, and then more negative self-talk than usual. Emotionally, if they seem highly irritable, have mood swings or feelings of hopelessness. Again, this is beyond normal. Obviously, teenagers, we see frequent mood swings and irritability and rebellion commonly, but just keep an eye out for that to see if it's higher than usual. If we see a lot of procrastination, more than usual, again, avoidance of tasks and withdrawal, that often means that it feels too big to even start, and that's why we procrastinate. It just feels too overwhelming, so we're not even going to start because we can't even fathom how to start. And then physically, if they're exhausted all the time, if you start to hear about a lot of headaches or sleep and appetite just seems off, all of these are signs of overwhelm. Why this is important is when we go into fight or flight, or when our amygdala starts firing, we can't learn. When we're in that state, it's just a fact. The brain can't learn when we're highly anxious. So we want to do whatever we can to keep enough anxiety to do well and keep progressing through our tasks and our to-do lists, but we can't get too high on the stress or anxiety or overwhelm scale. So these are things you can look out for. The next is, how do we boost confidence? So again, when you're in a challenging time of your life, a lot of times we need encouragement just to keep moving, to keep on the same path. So as parents and people and caretakers and people who care about these kids, what can we do from the outside to keep them on the path? One of the things is through encouragement. all the research backs this up, is that focusing on the process over the product, so their process versus the overall grades, will give us the best long-term result. So praising the student for having a great study session or going to office hours will get us much further along than praising them for the end grade. The product or the outcome will come in time if the process is strong. But again, we're playing the long game here. We're doing whatever we can to praise the process over the overall product. One of the stats I speak to all the time is the typical student with executive function challenges, specifically ADHD, gets 10,000 more negative comments than positive comments by the age of 10, and then it goes up from there. And so positive reinforcement works really well. We want to make sure our positive reinforcement is specific, not good job. It's like, I'm proud of you for getting your academic routine today and knocking out these 3 parts of your project. So very specific and sincere. Has to be sincere because obviously our kids see right through that. And this has nothing to do with lowering your standards, but we want to offer positive reinforcement when possible. We want to highlight the growth. In times of high stress or times of high growth, it doesn't feel like we're doing much. I'm sure everyone here has that experience in life where they were growing a lot and it felt hard all the time. It never felt like you were doing much. So an example was my first few years of college. I was trying to learn how to be independent, balance my life, be an athlete, be a student. Everything was so hard. And when I was in it, I never felt like I was getting any better. But then someone from the outside would say something like, wow, look how far you've come on getting your homework done over these past few months. And I started to realize how far I was coming, and it gave me the confidence to keep going. It helped with my resilience and my discipline and everything else. And so highlighting growth, because they're probably not going to see it, will give them confidence to keep going. And then normalizing mistakes. Again, we don't want to lower our standards or anything like that, but they probably will make a mistake over the next month and a half academically related. Normalizing that and then helping them with next steps to move on from there or to fix the challenge is the best way to do it. So these are the research-based things we can do for our students throughout a time of high stress to help them boost their confidence. If they do feel overwhelmed, going back to those symptoms we talked about earlier, there's 2 ways to build momentum. One is to really start small. And so break a task down into the smallest piece, even though there's so much to do. And as parents, we get anxious because we see this long to-do list. But breaking it down into the smallest possible step, helping them with that step to get the momentum moving, giving them lots of positive reinforcement, and then that should increase confidence and keep the momentum moving. So that's one way to look at it, is to start really small. So even though they may have a big math test or a study guide coming up, helping them finish that small math worksheet to get the momentum moving and to start that task initiation, the research shows that can be very helpful. The opposite of that may be helpful for other students. So it's the Mark Twain eating the frog first. So getting them started on the biggest task they have or the biggest tasks for that day. And then once they have that, everything else feels small. So there's 2 different ways to look at it. One is starting small to go big. One is starting big to go small. And again, what we're after here is self-reflection and self-assessment for the long term. What that means is that, again, our kids don't know which one of these will work best for them, and different strategies will work for every student. So we want to ask them when we try each, which one worked better for you? Which one made you feel more confident? Which strategy can you use moving forward? And so those are the 2 different ways we can look at to start to build momentum. Next, let's look at how we can avoid burnout and maximize learning. Most people know how muscle building or working out works in the sense that if we want to improve our fitness, we have to stress our muscles. So we have to lift weights or we have to go for a run, and that stresses our muscles out. So on a scale of 1 to 10, we're stressing our muscles at like a 7 or an 8. And then if you don't let your muscles rest, well, you don't see growth. So that's common knowledge to most people and most of our students as well. Well, the brain works the exact same way. So if we want to not only avoid burnout and maximize learning, well, we want to follow the same equation, this stress plus rest equals growth. What that means is when we're studying, we want to get from, on a scale of 1 to 10, again, a 7 or an 8 on focus. Focusing as hard as we can in that moment, and then completely let the brain rest. And so how this looks for most of us is that, we're at a 5 or a 6 when we're doing our work, and then we're scrolling on our phone or watching Netflix, and we stay at a 5 or a 6 most of the time, and we don't see this big growth. Well, not only does this help us avoid burnout, it helps us really get learning from short-term to long-term memory. So a few ways we can do this is that we can encourage reset days. After we're focusing really hard, and usually this is on a Saturday or Sunday, we want to reset as much as we can. And maybe no major schoolwork that day. This is so hard as a parent right now, but in a perfect world, we're not doing too much screen time. We're letting the brain really rest. And research shows that leads to mental and emotional recovery. And then a quick note, a piece of this as well, if your student is having a hard time resting, this is often for perfectionist students or students who struggle with anxiety, we want to help them zoom out. A lot of times they view this class grade, this paper, this presentation as kind of the make or break in their whole life, and they build it up. And so helping them zoom out really helps with this rest component. I know for a lot of ADHD students, including myself, sometimes we need to help them zoom in because they're not taking it serious enough. But to avoid burnout, maximize learning, come back to stress plus rest equals growth. Stress, focus as hard as you can, let your brain rest, and then we see maximum growth. That's reducing whelm and avoiding burnout, which again is a big challenge this time of the year. But let's talk about how to end the semester strong. So again, the challenge here is that this is a time, this 3 weeks right here is a time of very high workload for most students and overlapping deadlines. Unfortunately, teachers don't have the luxury of staggering deadlines often just because everyone's got to close things up. And so we see high workloads, overlapping deadlines, and that includes extracurriculars as well. Then we see increased stress due to all these assignments really matter. They're often formative, summative assignments, final exams. So all that ramps up into high pressure. And then one of the things I don't think a lot of people understand is for me having ADHD, or if we look at other executive function deficits, we start to wear down towards the end of the semester. It can be twice as challenging for us to pay attention or maintain attention. And so by the end of the semester, it really starts to wane. Our attention starts to wind down and pressure starts to ramp up, which usually is not the best recipe. So those are the challenges and those are what we're working with. Well, what helps us with this? One of the interesting things we've seen with students over the past 5-ish years, and this is due to an increased amount of screen time, social media use, but our students are becoming much more visual than they had in the past. Often we saw a subset of our students who were visual, but now it's nearly all of our students are very visual. And so when we take an abstract concept like time, what we find is that if we can help them visualize their time, they get it in a way that when we talk about it, they just don't. So time blocking works really well for this. When we do time blocking, you can do it on a sheet of paper. You can do it in a planner. You can do it digitally. Most of us do it digitally here. That's just what works for us. But you can do it however you want. But we want to help them see their time. So how we do this is, and it'll look different for middle school, high school, college, or wherever they're at in life. But we want to start by building and blocking times for class when they're at school, when they're in sports. And then we want to build in friends, social time, which most people forget, and also breaks. The brain, again, needs 15-minute breaks. So everything's jam-packed. Well, we know we're not going to learn like that. So we want to build everything in and see how it looks. Then when we build this in, again, we want to have some flexibility. Things change, life comes up. So build in some flexibility. And then when they start to see their time, they see how urgent that time is for them studying and getting everything done. And so we see procrastination actually go down. When they see a small block, let's say from 4 to 5 p.m. on Wednesday, they're like, wow, I don't have time after this. And so we see procrastination go down. So time blocking has worked really well during high stress times for a lot of our students here. The other piece too is that if your student is struggling getting started at home, or maybe if you're just tired of battling with them, because often parents, we ramp up, we know how important this is, and they just don't seem to get it. And there's a lot of battles this time of year. Let's reduce the battle at home and use that for a place of reset if possible, and use our resources outside the home. Again, this is different for every school. Middle school, not as much, but high school has more resources and college has a ton of resources. But if there is an office hours, this is the time of year to use every single office hours possible. Again, let's take the battle outside of the home. Teachers and professors are already there as it is, so attend those, basically 100% of them this time of the year. Then if the school does have a tutoring center, if they do have some kind of homework support, I know even the middle school I taught at has this as well. So attending those study groups. Everyone here is a part of Untapped, please use the homework center this time of year. We have more people working in our homework center purposely. It provides a structured environment for focus. Whether they need tutoring or not, this structure can be really helpful. And then again, when our students go home, they can use that for rest. And we want to keep the battles low at home. And it also helps with routines and procrastination because they do have that structure. Finally, the high schools, especially in Colorado, they build in tutor times during final exam weeks. I'm always amazed that 75% of students don't use these tutor times, but a common schedule around here is, high schools will have 2 final exams per day. Let's say it's first period and fifth period. Well, they'll have a tutor time right before that first period final from like 7:30 to 8:15 a.m. where the teacher has to be there to work with kids. And then they'll have it after the last final. So there's 7 to 8 to 10 tutor times, depending on the school that you go to, during finals week for high schools. They're rarely used. Please use those. Again, you're working with the person who's grading your assignment, who created the test. They're going to be the best resource. So working all these resources and structures in, it's just really helpful. And again, it takes the battle outside of the house. So routines for finishing strong. Again, if you struggle with these executive function skills, routines will be very helpful in your life. The research backs it up. This is probably the most important thing that we can do. Well, routines give us consistency. And so we want to look at whatever one routine we want to implement, whether it's around academic time or studying, sleeping. A lot of us sacrifice sleep this time of the year. So maybe we need a routine around winding our brain down to go to sleep, or maybe just a routine for breaks at some time in the day or social time. This is where the magic of parenting comes in is your student not taking this time of year seriously enough? And maybe we need an academic routine, or maybe are they a perfectionist and taking it too seriously and we need a break routine or a sleeping routine. So having routines provides consistency. It's very helpful for the brain for learning and retaining information. Bookending routines. So morning routines and night routines have shown to be very helpful. So if your student has a hard time waking up in the morning, we don't want them half asleep walking into a final exam. So what is that wake up routine that we do for a few days to a week before the final exam, where they have a specific routine that signals to the brain, okay, it's time to wake up and to focus. And then same thing, I know with my ADHD, sleep has always been the hardest thing. My mind just races at night. And so what is that wind down routine so I can calm my brain and get the necessary sleep needed to be successful in my final exams? And then one of the things for higher level students to keep in mind is there is so much research out there on ADHD specifically and what's called decision fatigue. The more decisions we make, the poorer each decision becomes. So if we're making all these decisions about what to eat, what to wear, and all these other things, the decisions that are important, like multiple choice tests and what topic to do for a presentation, well, those go down. And so reducing decisions and doing things like laying out your clothes the night before, packing a lunch the day before, packing your hockey bag, whatever that is, reducing the decisions will make the decisions you do have to make better. This is why Steve Jobs wore the same outfit every day. You see it over and over with successful people. We want to reduce decisions during high stress times. And again, the self-reflection piece here is, what is the one most important routine for you to have over the next few weeks? Talking to your student about it. This increases our metacognition or self-assessment, and this is the best gift we can give them, especially if they're going off to college sometime soon and they're going to have to navigate a lot of this stuff on their own. So those are routines. When we get overwhelmed, there's a debate on if procrastination is a behavioral thing. So if procrastination is because we just don't want to do the task, or if it's an emotional thing. So meaning we get overwhelmed. If it is emotional, if you side on that side of it, well, we want to break down tasks into the smallest manageable step. And then that helps get our students started. Again, going back to like building momentum. A lot of people feel like they're breaking down tasks when they're really not. So I'll talk to students and I'll be like, okay, you're overwhelmed by this final paper. Have you broken it down? And they're like, yes, absolutely. I'm like, okay, well, what's today? And they're like, do research. Like, that's not breaking it down. Breaking it down would be find 2 pieces of research from Google Scholar, and then we're breaking into small steps where we know when they're done. There's a beginning and there's an end, and it's very clear where the end is. Doing research has no clear ending, so we're not really breaking it down. Breaking it down is incredibly important. If you struggle with that task, you're not sure what to do, this is where AI can be very helpful. AI gets a lot of negative publicity for the way it can help students cheat. But one of the things that's really helpful is if you upload the assignment, the rubric, whatever, into ChatGPT or something called Goblin Tools, it can break it down into manageable steps for you if you're not sure how to do that. The other way to learn how to break things down is just talk through it with your student, or they can talk through it with a peer, someone here, if they're struggling with how to break down that into the first manageable step or the next manageable step. And then what we call active brainstorming. A lot of times our students get stuck, especially our perfectionist students, start to spin. And so we walk and talk. And so you're talking through this assignment, and when they're walking, something happens in the brain where they just start to get it more. And that's helped us a lot. So that's active brainstorming. Self-reflection, what we're after for the long term here is what methods help your student break down tasks when they feel overwhelmed. Again, sooner than later, they're going to have to do this independently. We want to bottle this with them, help them talk it out. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to do this independently, and we want to help them find out what works for them. These are real life examples, and this isn't one specific student, but this is just like a big picture example working with thousands of high school ADHD boys that we see, themes that are pretty constant. That during the last presentation, a lot of people found value in very concrete examples. And so these are a couple concrete examples. This is not one specific student, but these are just trends that we've seen working with thousands of students. So here's an example we've seen many times of the high school ADHD boy during this time of year. So the challenge is that they have a lot to do, they struggle with time management, and they feel overwhelmed. And when they feel overwhelmed, often that looks like shutting down or not caring. And so what strategies have worked really well with this population? Time blocking on Google Calendar works great because you can repeat classes, you can repeat tasks, and so it doesn't feel monotonous to them, and visualizing their time works really well. They really benefit from setting alarms, like getting started for their study blocks, and then reminders pop up on their phone about when to talk to teachers, when to talk to professors, and what to say. So having everything systematized, because they can be scattered and forget things, having everything really tightly organized and systematized through alarms and reminders has worked great for this population. And then a lot of short physical breaks for them. If they're not in a sport, maybe that's riding their bike home from school, walking around the block, jumping on the trampoline, whatever that is, a lot of short physical breaks keeps them focused. And then office hours. Their teachers want to see them. They can battle us at home, so attending office hours is often very helpful for this population. What have we seen when we implement these with these students? Well, we see reduced anxiety, we see reduced tension at home, we see them staying focused and successfully completing their finals on time versus running late and having this chaotic moment right before winter break begins. So that's an example of something we've seen a lot with the high school ADHD boy. Another one, and again, this is of course not every student, but another trend we've seen recently is the perfectionist high school female. And so what works for them? What strategies work? Well, their big challenge is they want to do so well that they get overly stressed, that amygdala starts firing so they can't focus, and then they burn out from long study sessions. So what works well for them? Scheduling breaks and self-care. Often they have everything really nicely laid out of, when to study, what office hours to attend, things like that. But they forget how important that stress plus rest equals growth model is. They forget the rest piece and they forget the self-care. So actually scheduling that into their day, it may only be 15 minutes, but scheduling that in has worked well. Focusing here on whether it's mindfulness, healthy sleep habits, whatever that is, helping them focus on themselves and getting them in a peak learning state has been really helpful, and making sure they just take care of themselves. Again, they want to do so well, and we have to pull them off regularly. When you're in a highly anxious state, when someone tells you to study, that's really overwhelming. Because when someone tells you to study, there's no beginning and no end, and you never really know if you're prepared for your final exam or not. What we've seen helpful with this population is that what we call the note card or the one-pager method. A lot of teachers will say you can use a note card on this final exam, or you can use a one-page sheet of paper. And even if the teacher does not say that, well, this is a great method because it gives a beginning and an end to the studying tasks, and they don't spin with anxiety. So how this looks is, let's say they have an AP psychology test over chapters 1 through 6. Well, if they can take all of that information and get that onto a note card, or take all that information and learn enough to get it onto a one-pager, and when the brain takes big information and synthesizes it into small information, well, then we learn it. So you're taking a lot of information, you're making it small, and you're learning it. And then you just have one page to study. Beyond that, there's a clear beginning and a clear ending to the task, and we don't spin with anxiety. So this note card study method works great for this population. If you have additional questions or you need more details on that, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. And then just again, having a clear ending to the study session. By 8 p.m., we have to start winding down for bed. By 10 p.m., whatever that is, having a clear ending so we just don't go on and on and on, because technically we could never be done studying for a test, and we don't want to spin with anxiety. So results we've seen from these methods is reduce stress. They actually do better on their finals because they are in a more focused state and they're confidently moving through the week and hopefully taking care of themselves. So let's look at how we recover after a long semester and prepare for spring semester, but not regress over break. The research shows over and over that students with ADHD or a different executive function challenge, they regress sometimes up to twice as much over the break. So they lose a lot of content knowledge academically compared to their peers. Well, why does that happen? A lot of times we think it happens because they struggle getting back into their routines. So for example, if their sleep schedule gets thrown off and maybe they're sleeping until noon every single day. Well, when they return back to school in January and have to get up at 7:30 and be ready to learn by 8:30, they just can't do that. It takes a long time for them to get back into that routine. We also look at things like maintaining focus, managing a lot of tasks, these executive function skills and reaching your goals. Again, these are just skills. And so when we fall out of practice with these skills, like paying attention over long amounts of time over break, we take a step back. So let's look at what we can do to recover but not regress. As always, the most important piece of executive function skills are not necessarily accommodations or 504 plans. Even though those are very important, we want to look at the bottom of the pyramid. So getting the right amount of sleep or having a sleep routine, getting movement, having routines, having structure. This is what's going to help our executive function skills more than anything else. So we look at striking a balance. One of the challenges we have as parents is making sure we are still doing whatever we can to stick to the bottom of the pyramid. So maybe catching up on sleep after a challenging month of December. Still getting the movement, even though they may not have structure through sports or through school or gym class or something else. And then having some semblance of routines and structure. So an example of that could be maybe we're just reading for 15 minutes per day and we do that right when we wake up so it's not a battle later in the day. And then once they do that, they have freedom throughout the rest of the day. We want to give them that routine and that focus of reading and something academic, but not overdoing it. So just some practice throughout the day is going to be very helpful. And then, like I said, we want to focus on the basics here. That will aid recovery quicker than anything else. Sleep, exercise, and routines. We really want to prioritize health and wellness while having a fun holiday break. So when we look at sleep, what the research shows us is that we want to stay within plus or minus 2 hours over break of what their school schedule is. Again, this is research and it's way easier said than done when real life happens. But what that means is that if our student goes to bed at 10 or 11, if our high school student does during the school year or when a school day is the next day and they have to wake up at 7 a.m. Well, we want to make sure that they're not going to bed later than 1 a.m. and waking up later than 9 a.m. over break. And as school gets closer, we shorten that gap little by little. We want to stay plus or minus 2 hours. Now, in real life, we want them to have, sleepovers with friends. We want them to have fun. So maybe that gets thrown off here and there. But the research shows whenever we can stay plus or minus 2 hours, that's really helpful. And maybe you start lax and tighten that up when school comes closer and closer. And then eventually waking up at the same time school starts, maybe a day or two before, and going to bed at the same time is going to be helpful so they can adjust and not regress. Obviously, nutrition, however that looks in your household. Everyone has a different view on nutrition and it's emotionally loaded, but the one thing over and over for students with executive function deficits is limiting sugary foods and processed foods as much as possible will help them recover and rejuvenate and get them ready to go back to school refreshed. And then some type of movement over break. This can be hard with teenagers, but getting some type of movement, it could be as simple as a 15 to 30 minute walk, or it could be something more structured. But these are the core things, sleep, nutrition, movement. We could throw in hydration there if we wanted to. That really is going to help us rejuvenate for second semester. And then spending quality time outside the basic health stuff, prioritizing in-person relationships and spending quality time. There's a lot of research that backs up how much that helps us refresh and get ready for the next semester. Those are the basics, and we could get into much more detail. Feel free to email me if you have any nuanced questions, but those are the basics on how we recover but not overdo it. So some type of small 15 to 30 minute academic routine mixed with prioritizing the basics is going to give us a lot of bang for our buck. Now let's talk about organizing for a new semester. Often families get antsy when school approaches and they want to make sure that their student is organized and ready to start the semester strong. So let's look at what we can do. And some of this will be done with your student's mentor, but the first thing we can do is really focus on the backpack. The amount of disgusting items that we have cleaned out at Untapped of our students' backpacks after break is pretty mind-boggling, where a sandwich or something else gets left in the backpack and nobody knows about it. So hopefully, as soon as they arrive home before break begins, or at least the day after, dumping out that backpack and getting all the junk out. This is kind of the one essential that needs to happen. If you're looking for more for academic time, or you just want to teach them this skill, the other important one too is looking at restocking supplies. The day students arrive after breaks, often they don't have pencils, they don't have paper. This is a great time to restock backpacks, and usually if you have a high school student, we'll change classes in some way, even if it's only a few. So making sure you have all your school supplies needed, restocked and ready to go for the upcoming semester. And then if you're really looking for things to do, organizing their Google Drive, archiving old assignments, maybe setting up new folders for new classes, making sure there's not any untitled assignments so that thing doesn't get too messy during second semester. That's a common issue we see, is students can't find digital assignments second semester because everything is super messy on their Google Drive. That's really helpful. So get rid of the old and set everything up for the new semester. Cleaning out the email. There's probably a couple hundred, if not thousands, of unread emails right now. Occasionally there is the important one from the teacher, especially when students start applying for college. If that's something they're interested in. Email second semester, we want to be able to find those if needed. So cleaning out all the old emails, deleting, and then unsubscribing is very helpful. Another thing too is cleaning out old bookmarks, unsubscribing, getting everything as cleaned up as possible so we start the new semester with a clear head, organized and restocked. An important piece of this, which I think most people forget, is because we're so anxious to finish a hard semester, we forget the reflection piece. Now, why this is important for executive function skills is we struggle with something called metacognition. Metacognition is a core executive function skill, and basically what it means is self-assessment or self-understanding. The only way we really gain this is if we take the time to reflect. So if you have the opportunity, whether it's driving, windshield time, walk and talk, or something around the dinner table, having an uncomfortable conversation about what worked well and what could be improved second semester is very important for our students long term. Again, when your brain works differently, the ultimate gift we can give our kids is this self-understanding. And so talking about what worked well that we need to do more of next semester for a successful semester, and what didn't go well, and how can we build in maybe a routine or do something else to be improved? Often when we ask this question, students don't remember what happened in September, October, and we may need to help them out, but this is a great thing to do to develop their understanding of their strengths and areas for growth second semester. It also helps us be proactive down the line, and we can get ahead of problems before they begin when we actually take the time to reflect. So I could not recommend this review and reflection more. Usually it's helpful a couple days after school ends, maybe even closer when school begins, because it's emotionally loaded and they're exhausted when school ends. And so having a good reflection conversation is something missed usually and very important. Here are common self-reflection questions that we ask our kids and see work very well is, what are you most proud of? This is a way to rephrase strengths because they may not understand that. It often blows my mind what students are most proud of. It's different than what I think it's going to be. But when they tell you what they're most proud of, asking a bunch of questions about why they were able to achieve that. We'll be able to figure out, okay, how does their brain work? what processes work for them, maybe what study methods work for them, but not just asking what you're most proud of, asking a bunch of questions about how they were able to achieve that thing. What's one habit or strategy that you can improve moving forward? The reason we ask for one is because when a lot of things go wrong, it feels really overwhelming. This is this lead domino conversation we talked about earlier in a previous presentation. But what's one thing that they can do to improve second semester that'll give us the most bang for our buck? And then for older students, how are you going to hold yourself accountable? Do we need office hours? Do we need more time in the Untapped Homework Center? Do we need something else? But how do we continue to increase accountability? Because we want to increase independence. And so these are 3 questions that work really well to start reflections if you need any. If you have any question and answer or something maybe was too high level and need more details, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is bslade@untappedlearning.com. And we also have been posting a lot of stuff on social media about people talking about what strategies have worked for them. So do not hesitate to reach out if I can be helpful in any way. And let's end the semester strong, rejuvenate, and have a great second semester. Again, we can't thank you guys enough for everything.